right, lead heads, welcome back to another episode of the Talking Lead podcast. I'm your host, Lefty. We have been leducating the unleducated since 2012, 10 years of the Talking Lead podcast, and we have been bringing you some great ones this season. If you tune into last episode, we did a great episode on reloading. So for those of you who want to be more self-sufficient and less reliant on supply chains, you need to start getting into reloading. And we had a great show with David Steer from Lockdown and Pete Pye with Defiant Munitions to give you the basics on what you need to do to get started with that. So go back, check out that episode. We had some giveaways for you listeners like we do every episode. This episode, I'm really excited because we are, as you're listening to this, in the 4th of July weekend, and I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate America, our freedoms, than to have this gentleman on with us now. And I'm going to play this little clip kind of as an intro for him.
This is Sheriff David Clarke. Violent crime went up nearly 10% in Milwaukee. Are you the next victim? You don't have to be, but that's your call. Armed criminals are being put back on the street by a soft on-crime court system even before the ink dries on police reports. Are you prepared to handle a life or death threat? Wisconsin's Personal Protection Act now gives you the same advantage that I have. Now it's the crook who has to wonder what you might do. Can be a great equalizer, but you always have to think survival. Remember, it's you and me now.
This public safety message brought to you by the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Our guest today is America's Sheriff, Sheriff David Clarke. Sheriff, welcome in.
How you doing, sir? Pleasure to be on with you, and hello to your listeners.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, and especially, like I said, this week with the 4th of July coming up. It's a great time in our history as a nation, and everything that's going on, all the divisiveness, all the controversy with the Supreme Court rulings that are going on right now. I just thought we couldn't have a better person on right now to really help us get through some of these tough times and maybe help us better understand some of these issues that we're facing than you, Sheriff David Clarke.
Well, thanks a lot. I think it's appropriate, too, of Independence Day. Our country as we know it, the United States of America, our customs, Western values, so on and so forth, the Constitution are all under siege right now. And look, we're going to have to fight to maintain what's left of them, and we're going to have to fight even harder to regain what we lost over the last, I would say, maybe 10, 15, 20 years as a result of not being attentive to what was going on behind the scenes with this subversive American left.
Absolutely. And, we thank you for your voice and everything that you're doing out there to protect this country, our Constitution. You continue to do it even after your nearly 4 decades of law enforcement service there in the Milwaukee area. Give us a little bit of background about your law enforcement career.
Yeah, nearly 40 years. That's a long time, but it went fast. Trust me. And I've seen a lot. I never tell people that I've seen it all. I've heard it all, but I've seen a lot. I've had a very unique view as a law enforcement officer, front row seat to the world, really. I mean, through the lens of Milwaukee County, but traveled this country and spoken to a lot of great people, great Americans, and learned about them as well. I started as a patrol officer with the City of Milwaukee Police Department. When I started, you came up walking a beat. Okay, you didn't get to assign a squad car until you put some time in. And when you're out there by yourself on the street walking a beat at night, third shift, Milwaukee's an urban district. It's an urban area. And you got to grow up fast as a cop. And, you got to think. You got to think for yourself. Help might be some ways away. So you learn a lot of things as you're out there by yourself. And then, of course, now there's no such thing as allowing people to mature and groom as a law enforcement officer. They throw them right into the fire. Yeah. And I think it's to the detriment because it takes probably anywhere from 3 to 5 years to become a seasoned officer. And what I mean by that is time after time after time, when you're exposed to these calls for service in these situations, you get a little better at handling them. What might work, what might not work. And it just takes time. That's why they call it seasoning. It doesn't happen overnight. So, I had that when I was working, when I did get to ride in a patrol car, there were 2 officers to every car. It's not so much the case anymore. And usually you were assigned to what was called a field training officer. And that field training officer had, 15, 20 years of experience that you were learning from. And now, you don't have that anymore. You got field training officers that have been on the job, 5 years themselves. So a lot has changed is what I'm getting at here. But I had the benefit of that. And then, after about 9 or 10 years, I got promoted to detective. So I was in criminal investigations, worked a wide variety of assignments there, property crimes, violent crime. I was assigned to the homicide squad of the Milwaukee Police Department. Investigated a lot of homicides, unfortunately. Matter of fact, I had a record year during that time. It was about 100 and maybe 60 homicides, which for the size of the county of Milwaukee, about 1 million people, is a lot.
Yeah.
And over the last couple of years, we have outdone that. So there have been record-breaking years in terms of homicides. Then I got into management, lieutenant of detectives for a while. Then I got promoted to captain, and I commanded precincts or districts. And then after that, I became the Sheriff of Milwaukee County. So I've had a full career. It's been a rewarding career. It's been great, a lot of experience, culminating in becoming the chief law enforcement executive, which was always my career goal, to lead an agency, and I got to do that in a city and town that I was born and raised in.
Very good, man. So you've had a very exciting career, to say the least. Controversy is a word that a lot of people use. Controversial, but outspoken. But you speak your mind, and you speak how you feel and what you feel. You're not you haven't been a puppet during your service. Was it 3 terms that you served as sheriff? 4
terms.
4 terms as sheriff. And that's got to be commended, and there's got to be a lot of people that respect you for that. Contrary to what we hear in the media about you, and that's another reason kind of why I wanted to have you on here, is to get your side of things as well, because in today's society, we all know that the media is controlled by the left, and their narrative is the one that's being pushed and driven, and there's very few news organizations out there. I mean, you can't even say Fox is a conservative news station anymore. Newsmax, maybe. They seem to do a pretty good job of representing our side of things. But yeah, man, I just wanted to get you on here and have you tell your side of the story. You've actually written a book also, which I kind of want to talk about that as we get into our conversation. It's called Cop Under Fire. How long ago did you write that book? How long has that been out?
It's been out about 5 years. Did pretty good for a first book. It's hard to get a book published. That was another one of my career goals. Once I became the chief executive, I wanted to be published. So, I got to check that box off, career goal. And, the thing about the book is, and you touched on this a little bit, when you don't subscribe to the
I think I'm losing you,
position
David.
in politics, things like labels like that, which I always say, controversial to who? Not to the people that support me. I'm not controversial, but I don't really care about that stuff. But what the book does is it gives people a deep dive into who David Clarke is. I mean, I was a public official, an elected official. People should know who you are. I take positions on a number of things that are important to me. I'm not a gadfly. I don't leap at everything. There's some things that come up in our public discourse that I just go, nah, that's not really high on my priority list to talk about. But there are certain things, core values, I call them. People want to call them conservative. That's okay. They probably are, but I don't think they're the province of any particular ideology, because, of course, the Democrat Party has changed considerably. A lot of the things that I subscribe to, they did too 25 and 30, 40 years ago, but not so much anymore. But anyway, it gives people a deep dive, and so a lot of things that I get to talk about, but you only get a snapshot on. I mean, and TV, a 5-6 minute interview is a lot. And you can't get everything out in 5 or 6 minutes on an issue. And so you have to talk sound bites. And when you do that, of course, the media takes advantage of it. Oh, he said that. Well, it's taken out of context in terms of the entire thing that I've said on this issue. I write a lot to do the same sort of thing. So that's what the book was about. My upbringing and my experiences and my views on some of these issues that are confronting America today.
Yeah. And you mentioned your upbringing, and I want to talk about this too. And I think it's probably got a lot to do with the person that you are today. Your father, and I don't want to talk about it. I'll let you talk about him, but your father served in the Korean War. So talk about that.
Yeah, a great man. He's still with me today. He's 91.
Oh, great.
And I've been blessed really with being the product of a two-parent family, loving, we never had a lot of money. My dad worked 34 years at the U.S. Postal Service. My mom worked in the school system, the public school. And, I was fortunate, like I said. My mom and dad didn't have a lot, but they poured everything that they had into the raising of their 5 kids, provided us with a decent education and, a lot of love and a lot of understanding, a lot of lessons. My dad was high on discipline. You mentioned that he was in the military. He joined the military when he was 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
He fought in Korea. He was an Army Airborne Ranger, had several combat jumps under fire, lost some of his colleagues coming out of the sky, into Korea. So anyway, he was big on discipline, and he insisted, and he actually demanded discipline from myself, and he made it clear. He said, "You're not going to discipline yourself, I'll do it." But it was that sort of foundation, really, that taught me things like personal responsibility, accepting responsibility for your actions, decision-making, learning life's lessons, realizing that, life is hard. It's not fair. I'll be the first one to say life's not fair, but there are a lot of people who it's more unfair to than it was for me, for heaven's sakes. I mean, how would you like to be born with a birth defect, for heaven's sakes? So, I look at that kind of stuff. And the biggest lesson that he taught me, my mom and dad, when you fall down, for heaven's sakes, get back up, learn a lesson from it, and keep moving forward. Don't lay on the ground in a fetal position crying, woe is me, and life's not fair, and those people are mean, and, they're racist, and so on and so forth. And overcoming obstacles was the biggest lesson that I learned from my mom and dad, because life is full of them.
Yeah, and I can attest to that too. Probably one of the best lessons that my dad ever taught me was, it's to be self-reliant. Don't ever rely on someone else to get something done, or if you want something. That was probably one of the greatest lessons that he taught me, and that's, do it yourself, and it's self-reliance is, the key to success. And I think a lot of what you hit on a core issue there, the family. Your father taught you the difference between right and wrong, and not to give up and not to quit. Your parents did that, and they did it as a family unit. I think that's what we're missing, and I think that's where a lot of these the youth today are going wrong. Is they haven't developed a conscience. They don't have a conscience, and that has to be taught. That has to be instilled at a young age.
Right. And also they instill virtues in me. Virtue is defined as a redeeming quality. Things like, I said responsibility, things like patriotism's a virtue. My dad was real big on patriotism. And, look at it this way. My dad fought in the Army when the Army was segregated, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, okay. I wanted you to mention that because the 2nd Ranger Infantry Company that he served in was a segregated unit. It was all African Americans.
Right. And so if there, from that generation, if there's anybody who could have a beef with this country, it would have been people who grew up back then under Jim Crow and under, real segregation, not these goofs today that don't, they have no idea the way it used to be and how it's gotten better. But anyway, my dad never held those hard feelings. I didn't grow up with a chip on my shoulder. We didn't have conversations about race in the household. It's just kind of, hey, look, you're going to have to figure out, be better prepared, doubly prepared to deal with the stuff that's going on in the world. And that's a better lesson than the lesson some of these young men are growing up with today: racism, white supremacy, this, that, and the other. I'm not here to get into an argument or a debate about whether that stuff exists. I'm like, hey, look, it's part of the human condition. because blacks can be just as racist as white people. And I've given examples of that. So part of the human condition, we're a better country than we were 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago, a much better country. And those are the things that I focus on, how we've gotten better, not about our sordid past.
And that's what people need to focus on, definitely. And of course, we learn from our past, and we need our history. So that golden rule, history will repeat itself. It's doomed to repeat itself. But with them trying to squash and hide and not educate and teach our kids history of, this is what it was like in the past, and this actually happened, rather than try to hide that and change it and, make a whole new narrative. That's how we learn, and that's how we become better.
Sure. There's no doubt about that. It's a rich history, this country. Like I said, it's not seashells and balloons, but at the same time, the goal of the founding fathers was to become better as a nation, to reach, some of these concepts like all men are created equal. They knew it would take time putting this country together. Some people try to make people believe that America created slavery and racism, and they didn't. No. Slavery goes back to the beginning of time. It goes back to conquest, where nations would conquer somebody and then enslave their people. Yeah, like I said, part of the imperfection of man, but that's gone on all throughout, since the beginning of man. And so the thing is to get...
And it still happens today. You've got the human trafficking that's widely prevalent around the world. And what was it just recently, that truck of like 51 migrants?
Yeah, human smuggling, yeah.
Yeah, so...
Diane, you get a big boxcar like that, 18-wheeler, in the summer months, especially down in Texas, it had to be like an oven.
Oh, yeah, 200 degrees or more, probably.
Yeah, and so I can't think of a more horrific way, other than dying in a fire. I can't think of a more horrific way to die than in some thing that's basically been turned into an oven, and you just sit there and bake.
Yeah, and supposedly they've caught the two guys, I guess the drivers of the truck. I don't know. We'll see what comes of that. But in Milwaukee, being the sheriff of Milwaukee, you're there on Lake Michigan. You're right on Lake Michigan there with Milwaukee. Did you guys have to deal with a lot of trafficking issues there, human trafficking? Did you see that? Was that prevalent in that area?
No, it was just starting. There were remnants of it, but it was something that was just becoming unearthed, if you will, as an issue. So, we're on a major corridor, I-94, which goes down to Chicago. Yeah. Chicago up for that sort of thing. But we had a bigger issue with drug trafficking coming up through I-94. Was identified as a high-density drug trafficking area. Yeah. So we had several programs going on, anti-drug programs going on with the feds. We worked with the feds on task forces to deal with that sort of thing. The human trafficking, like I said, was just emerging. It was mainly the sex trafficking, gotcha. Young girls.
Now, what was one of the biggest obstacles as sheriff of Milwaukee County that you experienced? And I know it would have been, the opposite political side, and them putting up barriers for you to get done. But other than that, what would you think was one of your biggest obstacles? What do you feel like your hands were tied on?
Well, it was the politics. I try to remind people, I'm in charge of public safety, not all this other nonsense. And everybody across all demographics, okay? Everybody wants to be safe. They want safe neighborhoods. They want to feel safe inside their homes, in their schools. They want the children to be kept safe. Everybody wants that. There's not one demographic that would stand up and say, we don't want public safety. We don't want safe streets, safe schools, so on and so forth. But the politics would always seep into it, because Milwaukee, the political class is very liberal. They're uber lefties. Yeah. And, I was a rock solid conservative. So that's where the clash always was. I was tough on crime, and they wanted more, soft on crime stuff, second chance programs. I'm not against that stuff, but look, I want to do what works, and if it doesn't work, I don't want to engage in it.
Yeah.
And I research, and I realize that all these programs and ideas the left comes up with for criminality, they don't work. They've been done before. They've been tried before. They bring them back, new and improved. They put a new label on the program, second chance for a guy that's been arrested 10, 15, 20 times. He's well past his second chance, but Absolutely. It sounds good to call it a second chance program. So the biggest thing was, getting through the politics that people tried to turn it into. But again, if I got elected 4 times as a rock-solid conservative in a very liberal county, it tells that the people were on my side, and that's where I wanted them.
Yeah, and that's what I don't get either. You were an elected official. The people wanted you there, and not only one time, but 4 times that you were elected. Contrary to maybe the controlling liberal leftist that was over your area there, the people were speaking, and they're like, hey, we don't want that. We want what this guy's offering and what he's got and his ideas. It just baffles me that the people they wanted you, but yet they were still trying to stop you from doing what the people wanted. It just
yeah, it was a constant clash, but that was the biggest. That was the biggest obstacle and hurdle, was the politics.
Yeah. Did you always want to be a sheriff growing up? Was that something you always wanted to do? It's kind of interesting. When I got into law enforcement, when I first got into it, I got into minimum age of 21. You have to be 21 to be a cop in most states across the country. Yeah.
And actually, it was my father who he didn't push me toward it, but he'd bring it up every once in a while. He'd say, ever think of going into law enforcement? And I didn't.
Yeah.
In the book. It's not, I didn't have I want to be X, I want to be, whatever. I didn't have any real sense of what I wanted to do with my life. But anyway, I was working for a beer distributor at the time. And, I realized after a couple of years of that back-breaking work wasn't going to be for me.
Those kegs are heavy, yeah.
Right, they are. And so that's when I began thinking about it. And I took the test, and to make a long story short, and the first time I took the test, I didn't make it through. I passed the test, but then I got these other steps that you have to take. And, keep in mind that the Milwaukee Police Department at the time was steeped in racism.
Yeah.
They just were. The chief was at the time. And so it was hard for black guys to get in. But you know what? I wasn't deterred. Remember I told you the thing about my mom and dad said, when you fall down, get back up. Look at it as a learning lesson and overcome obstacles. I took it again, went through with flying colors, and got in. And, the first couple of years were tough, like I said, because of the climate inside the department.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much the officers. It was some of the supervisors and some of the upper echelon of the agency were still, they thought this was the 60s. And
well, that was the era that they probably, they were trained in.
Right. Exactly. Product of their environment. But anyway, struggled through the first couple of years, fought through, and then finally established myself, as a competent law enforcement officer. I mean, my colleagues, my co-workers always saw it from the day I came in, because I was able to think and process information quickly. They knew I was educated. And like I said, it wasn't the officer so much as it was the supervisory staff. But anyway, that's life. And you just got to grind it out sometimes. And that's what I did.
You didn't point a finger as this is the reason, this person is the reason why I'm not getting where I want to be in life. You didn't take that as the excuse or the reason. You kept pushing, you kept persevering, and you got through it.
Well, you know why? Because once I got a taste of it, once I got accepted into the academy, and then you start to develop that camaraderie with law enforcement, I loved it.
Yeah.
And I said, nobody is getting in my way. of this being my career. And so that's why I said, you just got to grind it out. Started taking promotional exams along the way because I knew I wanted to move up into certain areas. Once after about the first couple of years, I really wanted to get into criminal investigations, which is why that was my first promotion. Was after 9 years, I think I got promoted to detective. And you got to fight through this stuff, and you got to believe in yourself. See, that's one of the things that the left cannot stand about me. They know that guy believes in himself, and when you get somebody who believes in himself, they're hard to stop.
Yeah, near impossible, definitely. And that's the thing. The blame game is, I think, a lot of people's detriment. They want to blame other people for their failures instead of doing what you do, and just ignore that. And this is what I want, and this is how I got to get there.
Well, that's one of the life lessons that my dad taught me. When things go wrong, he would say, start by looking in the mirror. Okay, it's one of those virtues. I talked about personal responsibility. Look in the mirror, and the guy looking back at you, ask him, what could you have done different to have affected a better outcome? My dad would say, start there, and then you can move on to the, this person, that person. But he always had me look in the mirror and say, what could that guy have done better to have affected a better outcome or a different outcome? And that's when you find out. You start looking inside yourself. You don't look at the other person or the other group or other obstacle. You say, David, this is where you have to improve to be able to overcome that stuff. And these are lessons that, unfortunately, a lot of young black men growing up today, they don't get.
No, because they don't have the mentorship, like your father. They don't have that role model to be able to teach that to them. And yeah, I mean, people point at guns, they point at mental illness, for our societal problems, but that's not it. It's the family, it's that right. Feeling of belonging, and I feel like I owe these people something, and I owe them a good representation on my part of going out in society because I represent them as well. And if I do something shameful to me, it's going to shame them. And, I think that stopped a lot of people, generations growing up from doing heinous crimes. It's like, there's several things I've thought about doing, not crime wise, but, it's like, maybe I shouldn't say that, maybe I shouldn't do that because that's going to bring shame to my family.
I was real
embarrassing.
Let my dad down, for heaven's sakes.
Exactly.
But that's the role that fathers play in terms of raising their boys, young men, is to teach them life's lesson, discipline them, teach them responsibility. That's the role of a father.
Yeah.
Respect big time. And respect started with my dad. My dad was, he it started there. And time I left the house, that respect carried over to some other adult, meaning like the school teacher.
Yeah.
Got the same respect for me that my father got.
Respect
the neighbor
your elders.
Right. Same respect. And it's those sort of things that, a family unit provide for their kids when you're in a loving family, and life's tough for families sometimes. There's no doubt about that. Sometimes families break apart. There's divorce, there's death, whatever. The parent might die. But there should be somebody there to pick up that, fill that void missing, and it shouldn't be the government. And so what we allowed the left to do was to fill these voids in this breakup of the family, this downfall of the family in the 60s, the black family. We let them fill it with Uncle Sam. Government program. There's no government programs to be raising any. The Uncle Sam became, he paid the rent, right? Rent assistance, kept the lights on with utility assistance, so on. So Uncle Sam didn't provide the love and the care that a human being does, like a mom and a dad.
I think that's what, and not necessarily the politicians or the government, but that's what America needs to focus on. This is what the citizens need to focus on, is that family unit again. And not necessarily God and religion, because I know you're a religious man. You were raised Catholic. But the morals that religion teaches. those morals have gone away because the government has stepped in and taken that out of our system. I think that's one of the big rulings that the Supreme Court did. That coach that was praying. Talk about your views on that.
Yeah, that's been one of these issues that been going back and forth for quite some time. We allowed the left to take God out of the public square. God became marginalized. Religion, when I say God, religion became marginalized, and we let them do it. They used to pray in public schools.
Yeah, they did when I was in school. Said the Pledge of Allegiance, did all that. Right.
And then we allowed the left to catch on to this thing about, separation of church and state, which is not anywhere in the Constitution. We have freedom of religion in this country under the First Amendment, not freedom from religion. And so when you look at that case, the coach would go to midfield after the game by himself. And then, later on, other players would join him. But he wasn't holding a, prayer session, whatever, just, silence. If people wanted to pray,
wasn't making it mandatory or anything like that. He's just invited. If people wanted to join him, they could join him. They're free to do so. Free will.
Yeah. Up until this last case, that stuff was, the courts would shoot it down. I mean, the courts would say, yeah, that's, proselytizing, they call it. But finally, I think this court, they're starting to get back more toward the originalist intent of the Constitution. And that's why we're seeing some of these in this last week or so. We're seeing the decisions that are made. These are originalists. These six, basically, the best you're going to get is 6'3", and sometimes 5'4". But they believe in the original text of the Constitution. And so when you talk about things like freedom of religion, when you talk about things like freedom of speech, you talk about things like right to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. That's the original intent. Now, of course, over time, adjustments are made, so on and so forth. But you want to stay real close to the original intent. And what's happened over time is we got too far away from it, where everything became, unconscious. You couldn't pray. You couldn't speak.
Because government is getting too big, and that was one of the original intents of the Constitution too, is to keep government small. But it's gotten way out of hand, and that's what we need to focus on too. And I think that some of these decisions that the Supreme Court has done is they're taking the federal government out of it, and they're leaving it to each individual state, which is where that's what the Constitution was designed for.
Sure. If we taught these kids something, which we don't anymore, we don't teach history. The founding fathers intended the states to be stronger than the federal government. That's what they wanted under the 10th Amendment.
Absolutely.
Of course, that's been shifted on its head. The federal government looms over everything now, looms over the states. The way these pendulums swing, as your viewers and listeners know, they happen in cycles. It's going to take some time to get back to what this country should be, and it's the right of the states. It's about self-rule.
Yeah.
How do you shrink the size of the federal government? The federal government, all these bureaucracies, all these agencies, they become de facto legislatures when they start making their own laws outside the Congress, which is not supposed to happen. That's the biggest challenge, I think, for anybody running for Congress or president right now, is you better have a solid plan as to how to shrink the size of the federal government. I don't want more laws. We have enough laws. We have enough regulation. I want these people to go to Washington, D.C. and leave me the hell alone. Let the states figure this out. And we can have these arguments at the state level, but we can't have them in Washington, D.C. I can go to my state legislature here in Madison, Wisconsin, and, sign up to speak on a bill. Try doing that in Washington, D.C. They don't allow that. And so that's why I said it's better if states are left alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I kind of want to get back to your dad. You said he's still alive?
91.
91. I would love to get him on the podcast.
I don't know about that. No, he's a fine, but he, and I'm a lot like him. He speaks his mind too.
Yeah, and that's great. I love that. I would love to hear some of his stories about the Korean War, and I don't know if he's comfortable talking about that kind of stuff or not. But
he wasn't growing up. He never talked about the war and his time in the military. But a book came out with by a bunch of retired Rangers on that unit, and the book details a lot.
The Buffalo, was it the Buffalo Rangers? Is that what it was? I think I remember hearing something about that. Buffalo Soldiers or something like that.
Buffalo Soldiers, yeah. So I got most of what went on from reading that book. And, he gave me a copy and he signed it.
Nice.
And I did read it. I wanted to know about, my dad fought for freedom. My dad fought for this country. And he lost colleagues. He's one of the fortunate ones that made it through. But I wanted to know more about that. And I, like I said, I don't know that he was real comfortable talking about it, but he was in that book, and his fellow Rangers were in that book. And so I learned a lot about his military service, man. I came away proud. I really did. And I say to this day, I wasn't in the military, but I say my dad gave me my stake in America. My dad fought for freedom. My dad fought for this country. And,
absolutely,
obviously, that's my stake in America is my father.
That's awesome. I love that. Now, you do a podcast too, is that right? Are you still doing your podcast?
No, I had to give it up. I had a podcast on the Blaze, Glen Beck.
Yeah.
Platform. And then I got involved with the Trump campaign back in 2015, and so I was doing a lot of traveling all over the country to obviously stump for Donald Trump to become president. And so I didn't have the time to dedicate to it anymore. I'd like to get back, and I host local radio.
Okay.
I've hosted the Sean Hannity radio show. I've hosted Dennis Prager's national show.
Yeah.
But now it's mainly local. News Talk 1130 is the station here, and it's got the largest listening audience in the state of Wisconsin. But I get to fill in as a guest host when those guys go on vacation or what, I need some extended time off. I'll get called and say, could you do the show on Tuesday or Wednesday?
And I'm sure that's probably people can get on the internet and no matter where they're at, they can listen to it.
And I post when I done with the show is live, but when I'm done, they'll podcast it, and I usually post it on my social media. My social media is at Sheriff Clarke, and it's Clarke with an E, Clarke, and it's the same handle at Sheriff Clarke for Parler, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram. It's all at Sheriff Clarke.
You haven't been banned from those, from Instagram and Twitter and all that?
Oh, I've been suspended by Twitter a number of times.
Yeah.
For picky unit stuff, but that's, like I said, that's the way it is. And
I'm on their shit list right now. Instagram's apparently, because I'm being heavily shadow banned on my stuff.
Oh well, Instagram hasn't really messed with me, but
yeah, I'm on the radar.
That was never over the line anyway. But like I said, picky unish. So, I'll tell you a quick story here. I got suspended by Twitter once because I called Stacey Abrams, who was a failed candidate for governor of the state of Georgia.
Yeah,
you might have heard of her. I called her a wench. And they banned me for that. They call that abusive. First of all, she's a public official. You should see the names they call me.
Oh, yeah, but then they're okay with that.
Yeah. So I called her a wench one time in a tweet, and they said it was abusive, and
banned you?
They suspended me for, about a month. But they said if I took it down, I always challenge it, and you're not going to get anywhere with them. But they say, you can appeal this, but if you take it down, we'll put you back on. I don't take them down.
I got you. Well, I'm kind of experiencing it for my first time, like I said, through Instagram. And I'd made a post, like I do for all my shows, for my listeners to post questions because we record and, I don't do it live. So I made that post, and it's heavily been shadow banned, I guess, because you're my guest. Might be what it is, but we did get a few questions here. Let's see. Brett Badow asked, when did you realize that your career was under attack by the liberal media? Was this abrupt or happened slowly over time?
Once I got elected sheriff, and now I have a platform and started expressing my views on certain things relative to public safety, tough on crime, the Second Amendment, that sort of thing. And then that's what put me in their crosshairs, so to speak.
Yeah.
'Cause I had a platform now, and people were listening, and it grew national. Became a national platform. My position on the Second Amendment, my position on crime and violence, my position on race issues. And they were contrary to the liberal ideology, right? I'm the black guy. I'm supposed to be a liberal. I'm supposed to scream, racism and white supremacy and so on and so forth. But that's just not me. I'm an independent thinker. We were talking earlier about some of the labels they put on me, controversial, is one they like to use. But you'll never hear him say things like, he's well thought out. He's an independent thinker, because I can explain my positions when given the time. Like I said, I do a lot of writing.
Very well spoken. Yeah.
It makes sense. The stuff that I talk about are things that most people already know.
Absolutely. What would you say was maybe the event that happened during your career that brought you the attention?
It was that 30-second ad that started the show with. That was meant for, there was a series of home invasion burglaries here in Milwaukee County. And some of the advice given out by the Milwaukee Police Department, it's the sheriff at the time, but, stuff like, big screen TVs at the time were a big item to be taken out in these home invasion robberies. And the police were giving advice like, if you buy a big screen TV, cut the box up into little pieces when you're done so people don't know you bought a TV. And, I'm listening to this. I'm like, wait a minute. If I buy a big screen TV, the only thing I'm interested in is getting that bad boy out of that box, hooking it up, throw the box out by the trash, and start watching TV and enjoying it. So I thought we got to do something different here, because these are home invasion robberies, armed robberies, where people are home.
Crimes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I put out a 30-second radio ad. You played it at the beginning. And basically reminding people their role in their own safety. But see, this was something new because, most of the time the message from police is, just call 911. Dial 911, my rear end. I have to defend myself and my family. I'm the first line of defense, and I need to accept that responsibility. So the ad said, consider taking a firearm safety course, so you can defend yourselves and your family until we get there. I didn't tell anybody to buy a gun. That's a decision they have to make. But if they are going to make it, I think they ought to be educated about it and learn how to use it.
Yeah.
Learn how to operate. And that's all the message was you play a role in your own safety. And that 30-second ad went viral, and it was being played all over the country. I was interviewed all over talk radio nationally about, and it was, what was unique was most law enforcement officials they don't tell people to defend themselves. They tell them, I'll just call 911 and let us handle it. That's not what I subscribe to.
Yeah. And that's an awesome message. And I can see where that would definitely tick things off with the liberal media. Now, I've seen how they've twisted that message and saying that you're telling them that if you're in trouble or, you need us, we're not going to come. They were interpreting it that way, that you were telling people that, which we all know that you weren't.
Yeah, they twisted and turned it. And that's okay, because the people who that was intended for, it was not national. It was a 30-second ad I put out on talk radio stations in Milwaukee. It was an ad. You had to buy time, right?
Yeah.
It was meant for the residents of the city of Milwaukee and the county of Milwaukee. And of course, you can't control it if it goes viral. It did.
Which was good.
But
it was a good thing, yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm public safety first. I want people, like I said, to be safe in their homes, their schools, they're in the streets.
Yeah.
You see what's going on today, even outside the home. It's. I'll tell you what, Wisconsin, during the time I was sheriff, passed carry concealed license legislation. allowed people to get a permit to.
I was going to ask you, what are the laws there as far as the firearm carry goes in
Yeah,
Milwaukee,
it's pretty good, and it's pretty. It's user friendly. You have to take a 4-hour course at a certified gun safety program, and you take the 4-hour course, get a certificate. You fill out the application, send in the state, they send you a license. I mean, it's pretty.
So
and the thing is, Wisconsin doesn't require you to shoot as part of the training. It's up. If you're a responsible gun owner, you're going to take care of that anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
But some states will use that because if you're not real accurate, you can't pass that portion of it. So it's done to frustrate people.
Yeah.
But
I used to think that because I grew up with firearms my whole life, hunting and shooting shotguns and rifles and that I could handle any situation. I don't need any training. Until I went to my first defensive handgun course, and I didn't realize how dead I would be had I not taken that course because of the stress levels that your body goes through, or somebody that didn't need to be dead would have been dead, So it teaches you that discipline, the muscle memory. It's just something that every firearm owner needs to do. They need to take a certified defensive handgun course.
Sure, and there's different schools of thought on it, and that's okay. That
sure.
Discussion can be had within the environment that whatever state you live in. But the thing is too that some of these states enact these steps to frustrate people who want a DCL, and it makes it hard to get it. Like some states have where it costs $500.
Oh yeah, and let me clarify. I don't think it should be a law or a rule. I just think as a responsible individual, you should do that.
Right. Sure.
By no means do I think that needs to be a law that people do that. No.
Yeah. Fortunately for me, growing up a law enforcement officer, we got all that training and the practice. The practice is what's important, what's missing, because you can go out and you can take a course and you can qualify one time, but being accurate with a firearm is a skill. And in order to become good at a skill, you have to practice.
Yeah.
So you should probably be getting out there once a month and maybe run through 50 rounds, like you said, so it becomes second nature, ingrained behavior. Most people, they're not going to do that. Well, we don't control human behavior, and it's a responsibility. Since we've had this carry conceal license legislation, the left was predicting bloodshed in the streets and shootouts.
Yeah. This is the Wild West, that they called it.
Yeah, none of it came to be. They're not having any problem with this law as it is. But what I'm working on now is trying to get rid of that fee. Yeah. The license lasts for 5 years, but then you have to, and all you have to do is fill out the renewal, but it costs you $25. Yeah. What other constitutional right that you exercise do you have to pay $25?
That's illegal.
And fill out an application to do?
That's illegal. It's illegal to charge for a constitutional right.
Can you imagine that in order to vote, you have to pay $25? And every time you vote, you have to re-up your voter registration? No, it's one time. And there's no fee for voter registration fill-out form. Why is there for concealed carry? And that's why I said, I get tired of the Second Amendment being treated like the bastard child of the Bill of Rights. Right? There's all these steps and hurdles. First Amendment, you don't have to fill out an application to speak your mind. Freedom of religion, you go to church, you don't have to fill out and pay $25 to be able to go exercise the freedom of religion.
Now they do in some areas. Don't you have to pay like a fee or something if you're going to organize a group of people to protest or something like that? Don't they? You paperwork or something you got to fill out?
Well, it depends on, for protests, it depends. Like if you want to shut a street down, you got to pay. Well, that's reasonable. Yeah. You got to pay the city to come out and set up barricades. There's a cost to that. But if you're going to stay up on the sidewalk and march down the sidewalk or just stand on the public sidewalk, there's no fee.
Yeah.
There's no permit required.
So we talked a little bit about the Second Amendment. We talked a little about some of those court rulings. And the two big ones was the religious one, the Second Amendment, and then of course the Roe v. Wade decision that they made to turn it over to the individual states. And there were two more, I think, 2 or 4 or something like that left. I can't remember exactly what they were going to be.
One of the big ones is this EPA. They're trying to.
That's what it was.
Trying to and these federal agencies, these federal bureaucracies that are making law that they're not allowed to do. That's a legislative process, and they're acting like a pseudo legislature. And so, if the court, and who knows? I don't try to predict what the court's going to do. You can't. It's hard to do. But it would be a big step if they slapped down the EPA and said enough of this. Anything you want to enact like that has to go, be passed by a legislature.
Yeah. Got another question here from one of our listeners. This is Corey Brown, and he wants to start off with a scenario, I guess, here. It says, I need to put my glasses on. It says, I'll lead my comment with a disclaimer. I've been shot at twice and been robbed by gunpoint 4 times. I finally buy a handgun and get my CCW permit, and miraculously all my problems disappear. I 100% believe firearms prevent crime in more ways than one. I lived a very sheltered life until I went to college. Then life hit me with a ton of bricks looking down a barrel of a gun. Now I'm where I'm at because I bought a gun and took a class that opened my eyes to the world, and I quit being a dumbass and support the gun community as much as I can. What are you doing to educate people to make life choices better than me? I think we've kind of we've kind of talked about that. I mean, indirectly we've answered that. But is there like a specific thing that?
Yeah, like I said, I write op-eds. I write for a law enforcement magazine called Blue, BLUE, Blue Magazine. I write 2 columns a month. I talk about some of these things that were mentioned by that particular question. And also I do a lot of radio interviews. Like I said, I get to guest host, talk radio. I talk about these issues, share my ideas. I don't tell people what to do. I just say, here's my views. These are some of my experiences, and hopefully people can learn from them. But I want people to make these decisions on their own. I do, Newsmax TV. I'm a contributor to Newsmax TV. So I have platforms with which I share these views and these ideas. My social media. Follow my social media. I don't just get on social media and just, the left sucks. I mean, well, what value is that? I usually attach it to a news story, and then I'll give my take on a news story. So you can read the news story and say, oh, this is what this said, and here's what Clarke thinks about it. Right. In this 280 words, whatever. Those are the opportunities that I take to, what's called educate. No, share my ideas and share my experiences with other people who might be interested.
That's the best way to do it, definitely. Peter Wiktorski on Facebook says, if you woke up tomorrow as a 25-year-old with all the knowledge that you gained during your career, would you still go into law enforcement given today's political climate? He says, personally, I went through the academy 27 years ago. It would not do it under the current administration. I think that's... Absolutely not. Not in this climate. Climate, I should say. I get asked that a lot from people who are considering a law enforcement career. I couldn't in good faith tell them, that would be a good move in this current climate of cop hating. The political class doesn't support you. Prosecutors don't support you. You go out and you do the best you can with the training and the judgment that you have. Something goes horribly wrong through no fault of your own, and you're looking at a criminal indictment potentially from a politically motivated prosecutor. What I tell people is go get your 4-year degree, your bachelor's degree, and go into one of the federal agencies, law enforcement, if you want to. I couldn't in good faith do it. I'm sending people potentially to their death, and not just killed in the line of duty, but, criminal indictment. Right. And it's just a lot has changed, and no, I wouldn't suggest it. But that's a decision again. I'd say that's my view, and you got to make the decision for yourself. That's a good point. So with, you said you served you helped with his campaign, Trump. With the 2024 election, what do you predict as far as, I guess, do you think he's going to run again? Is Trump going to run again? Who's going to run with him? You going to help with that? You going to take part again?
First of all, 2024 is a ways away. 2 years is an eternity in politics. I don't know if President Trump's going to run for re-election. I don't try to get into his head. I've met him. I got to know him. I didn't just meet him one time, shake his hand. We spent time together on the campaign trail.
Sure.
We talked a lot. And then even after he got elected, a couple of times he came to Milwaukee, the Milwaukee area, and I got to ride in a presidential limousine with him, share some thoughts with him. But I don't try to get in his head. I don't know what he's going to do. But I say, when I try to remind people, I remember I said, remind. One step at a time. Okay? To me, I'm worried about today. I'm not worried about tomorrow. You know why? Nobody's promised tomorrow. I'm worried about today. I can influence today. I can't influence next week. I can't influence November. I can influence today to build toward November, to build toward 2024. So if you look too far down the road, I'm not saying people can't plan for the future. That's not what I'm talking about. You're going to miss what's right in front of you.
Yeah.
But take care of the fight that we're in right now, and it's for the fight of the soul of this country. It's happening today. It isn't happening in November. It's not happening in 2024. Let's stay focused on the stuff that we can influence today, and we'll build toward that. And as we get closer, we can start to talk about that.
More important than the presidency is your local elections. The people, the individuals that you elect locally in your cities, in your towns.
Yeah, school board elections have taken on a new importance, thank God. Focus at the local level. The rest, the future will take care of itself. I have strong faith in God. God knows the future. He doesn't always share it with us. And so I trust in him, and he'll take care of 2024.
Does God wear a cowboy hat? I bet he does. I bet he's got a big old Stetson. I wanted to ask you, I've got a line of questions that I asked my new guest. So what's your earliest recollection?
You got. And sometimes it hurts.
My father always had guns in the house. He was in the military, so he was skilled in handling firearms. And we go shooting, and he'd teach me about it. Biggest lesson he taught me was keep your hands off my firearms. And you know what? I was never tempted to. I was never curious to, like, when I'm home by myself, to go sneak into my. My dad kept one in his bedroom and my mom's bedroom. Yeah. I was never tempted to go in there. And say, keep your hands off my firearms. He did let me handle them. Like I said, we'd go out shooting. Mm-hmm. And so that was my first experience, was just through my father.
You remember the first one you shot?
Yeah, with my father.
Do you remember the first firearm? You remember what it was?
Oh, it was a semi-automatic. It was a...
Probably still have it, don't you?
It was a Walther.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Probably a 380, I think.
Yeah.
We went to... I remember it vividly. We were at this park in Beloit, Wisconsin. Beloit's a rural area. It's called Big Hill Park. Very spacious, safe area. We'd set up stuff on a tree stump or something and target shoot.
Nice.
I wasn't that good at the time, but at least
you got to start somewhere, right?
Right. Yeah, holding the firearm and keeping it pointed down range and that sort of stuff. I learned from him. He taught me that lesson too. He says every firearm is loaded. Just assume it. Don't guess. Don't think. It's loaded.
Every firearm's always loaded. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it's not, it's loaded. Treat it as it is. Yeah. That was a big lesson my dad taught me.
You think that way. I always get a kick out of these stories. People say a gun went off and they're cleaning their gun. That's a bunch of BS. It just is. Nobody cleans a loaded gun.
Hey, how about prime example, Alec Baldwin?
Yeah.
I didn't pull the trigger. It just went off.
Yeah, no, guns don't just go off.
No, you pulled the hammer back for one, knucklehead.
Yeah. Finger outside and off the trigger. Outside the trigger guard and off the trigger. Those are simple lessons that prevent some of these things. So every time I hear a story of someone cleaning a firearm, they weren't cleaning that firearm.
Yeah.
They were fooling around with it. That's what happened.
Yeah, or they forgot it was loaded. They didn't check it.
Right.
And boom.
Yeah.
And boom. So we know about your law enforcement career. What would you think, or would you say, is your crowning achievement during your nearly 40 years? And it doesn't necessarily have to be while you were sheriff. There might have been something that you did, when you were a detective or.
Yeah, actually, outside of law enforcement was my education. I got my bachelor's degree after I joined the police department, and I got a master's degree.
Oh,
that was a crowning achievement. My mom and dad were real big on education, and
good for you. What's your master's in?
It's in Homeland Defense and Security. It's I attended the U.S. Naval Academy postgraduate school in Monterey, California.
Hell yeah!
And the Center for Homeland Defense and Security. So I'm
that had been interesting.
Yeah, it was. That was cool. Very, very, very challenging, very difficult, but I'm real proud of that. My education. I stress it to young people today: get your education. It's the traditional vehicle to upward mobility in the United States of America. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to a 4-year college. Maybe you want to go to a trade school, but that's education.
Sure.
Right? That's education. And then probably inside of law enforcement was becoming the chief executive of a large law enforcement agency. Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office is one of the 50 largest sheriff's offices in the United States of America.
Yeah.
And the fact that I got elected, getting elected is hard. It's very hard to get elected, no matter what level it is, city council, whatever. And I was always the biggest vote getter in the county. I used to get more votes. I usually won. I'd get like 240, 250,000 votes in an election. I got more than the congresswoman. I got more than the governor in Milwaukee County.
Oh, wow.
I outdid them in the county. So the fact that the voters of this county had the confidence in me to allow me to serve them, that's just public service in that capacity. I got to be the sheriff in the town, the city, and the county that I grew up in. That's cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. What was one of the coolest pieces of kit or maybe firearms that you've had exposure to? Maybe it's something that you got to use or see or test out on the force.
Uzi.
An Uzi, yeah.
And the reason I got to do that, I got to do some training with the Secret Service.
Sweet.
So the Secret Service and the FBI, and they have access. So I got to shoot an Uzi. And then also my own agency, we have fully automatic rifles, fully automatic.
Yeah.
Those are fun.
Oh, yes, they are.
You can either do it single action or 3-shot bursts. In other words, pull the trigger and hold it, and it'll 3, and there's a lever on the side, or fully automatic, where you can run through 50 rounds in about 5 seconds. So those experiences and the training and handling of that. I own 3 semi-automatic rifles myself. Mm-hmm. I have an AR-15. I have an M&P 15, which is a Smith & Wesson.
I own a couple.
5 or 6 handguns. So I'm well stocked.
Locked, stocked, and ready to go, baby.
Also, I have something here, and this is something that we got to look at in terms of the next Congress. Well, we're not going to get it through Joe Biden, but
Yeah.
the GOP missed the opportunity for concealed carry reciprocity. In other words, your CCL is recognized in all 50 states.
It just needs to be national.
And they should have got it done, the GOP, when Trump got elected. They control the House and the Senate and the White House, and the Congress never brought it up. Trump said during the campaign he would sign it. The bill came to him. Well, they never forwarded the bill. But I have I do have a CCL that's allows me to carry in all 50 states. It's a federal license. It's because retired law enforcement officers can get one.
Yeah.
So I carry a gun in all 50 states. But I think that every U.S. citizen should have that same thing. It's like your driver's license. You get a driver's license or a marriage license. You don't have to go to each state and find out if you can drive in that state. It's universally accepted. Yeah. And we need that for CCL. So that'll be something I'm working on if get control of those 3 chambers again.
Absolutely. And that's something that we've been pushing for a while now. Not only that, but let me ask you this. I'm just curious. I had no intention of asking you this, but what are your thoughts on the ATF and the need for the ATF?
Well, they've gotten way outside of their original mission. It was more toward the alcohol and tobacco.
Explosives.
When we first found it.
Yeah.
It was to raise money for the debt. People go back into the history, and they I don't find them. And by the way, I'm trained by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in terms of gun trafficking. I visited their headquarters and their building where they have all these firearms that they've
confiscated.
Whatever. Yeah. As long as I think the issue is who's in charge of it. All right, when you get a Democrat president, they're going to put an anti-gun person in charge of the ATF because the head of these agencies, they set the pace. I'm obviously not for any sort of gun. We have too much gun control in this country, way too much. We don't need any more, not one. And I keep saying no, no, no to any suggestion of more gun control. None. And people, what about this? I go, no. What about this? No, we have enough. We don't even need any more.
Everything's covered a couple of times.
Yeah, the ATF, I didn't find them to be too much of an obstacle when I was the sheriff.
Yeah.
They basically were used for tracing. In other words, if you got a firearm at a crime, you do a tracing investigation. Well, that's through the ATF. They can tell you when that gun was first sold, who it was sold to, and then as it moves around, and you do that to, sometimes it'll help you catch the perpetrator, but it furthers the investigation. You can go to the person who originally bought it and say, yeah, I sold it about 5 years ago to John Smith. Mm-hmm. And you can go to John Smith and, yeah, I sold that or whatever, or it was stolen or whatever. The ATF really didn't bother me.
Yeah. Well, and I can understand as a law enforcement, but as a citizen, and some of the things that they're trying to enforce and impose, like the 80%, they call them the ghost guns, which is really not an issue. It's not as big an issue as they're making it out to be, and they're classifying things as unserialized or ghost guns that aren't, just to up their numbers, obviously. But they had that new ruling recently where they have clarified, I guess, what a 80% is, and that how they're to be sold. And from this point, I don't know that they're legal now. I don't understand the ruling myself, so that's something that I've got to do a little more research on personally. Yeah, it's something we have to keep an eye on because it's emerging. Yeah, with this ghost gun. That term probably came from the left. But it's been it absolutely did. But it's something that we've had in this country. We've been able to make our own firearms as long as you're not selling them. There's rules and laws in place already. As long as you're not a felon and you can own a firearm, you can make your own, firearm at home. So, but that's where they're impeding on that, and that's some of these liberal laws, that they're trying to skirt through by going through the ATF instead of having to make laws or anything. Then they leave it up to the ATF to make these rules, which, like you said earlier, yeah.
What are your thoughts on? Because I have mine, I'll share them with you, but I want to get yours first.
Sure.
That convicted felons can never own a firearm. What are your thoughts on that?
So that's a tough one. Because there are all kinds of different felonies.
Yeah, I'm not trying to spot it.
No, you're not putting me on the spot at all. It's one of those things where I don't think that you can just say, I think they can or they can't, because there are different types of felonies. There are different types of crimes.
That's what I was getting at. And that's where I'm at. Like if you are convicted of passing bad checks, forgery or something, and it rises to the level, let's say it's a couple $100,000, rises to the level of felony. That's not a violent crime. Mm-mm. Why should you not be able to own or possess a firearm or purchase one for the rest of your life for passing bad checks? I think for people convicted of violent crimes, yes, because they've demonstrated that they're not responsible with that instrument. But a person writing bad checks, I think there's certain
bad checks, tax evasion,
you should not be prohibited from owning and possessing a firearm. But that's something that Congress is going to have to do. But I've always found that problematic with certain levels of a felony.
Yeah. Like
felony criminal damage to property. Right? I mean, if it's over 10,000, every state's different.
People can do what G. Gordon Liddy did, and they're not my guns, they're my wife's. Those are my wife's guns.
Anyway, that's another thing that.
No, that was a great point to bring up. But yeah, that I think it all depends on the actual crime is what it should be based on.
Yeah.
All right, next question. What's your next bucket list? Gotta have, want to have. As soon as you get the opportunity, you're going to own it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a firearm, but it can be. It could be anything. It could be a truck. It could be maybe a new Stetson you're looking at. What's your next gotta have, want to have bucket list item, or maybe something you want to do?
Yeah, I don't know that I have one. Because I lead a comfortable life. I have most of what I want and need.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything out there that, hey, if I ever get the chance, if I ever had the money, I would.
So you're not like eyeing one of those new Broncos or anything like that, or? No. No. Okay.
Nice SUV. Don't really have anything on a bucket list.
All right, let's modify it a little bit. Laws be damned, money be damned. What would you do or own? Laws don't apply, money, no object.
A jet.
Like a Lear or a Citation or a Gulfstream? What?
Gulfstream, yeah. Because I do a lot of traveling. I have to try to travel commercial, and traveling's a pain in the ass these days.
Oh, shit.
People's private jet, and that's the way to go. So it's nice you can avoid airports, all the TSA nonsense. You just go to the regional airport. They take your bags as soon as you hit the door, and they carry them out. And all you do is board the plane. No line, nice. No people going through your stuff without a warrant. A jet.
I like it. That's a good choice. Now, would you outfit your jet with some sort of a defensive system? Again, laws be damned, money be damned. You could put anything on that jet you wanted. Throw some Stinger missiles on there.
I don't know if they got to go that far, but that too is I can go on there armed. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's another benefit of that. If you could spend the day at the range, and I use the range just kind of as a metaphor, who would you like to spend it with? Whether they're still alive, maybe they've passed, or maybe a fictional character or group of people. Who would you like to spend the day at the range with?
John Wayne.
The Duke.
Yep.
Very nice. And which particular movie of his is your favorite?
Geez, I can't even think of the name of
There's
most
so
of them.
many.
I've seen a lot of John Wayne movies.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, my favorite, John Wayne didn't star in it, but it was, yes, he did, in the original. What's the one? There's a book, too. It's the only time I've read the book and saw the movie of any movie that had a book written before it.
Was it the one that they just redid not too long ago with, what's his name?
Yeah.
Bridges, Jeff Bridges?
Yeah.
I know what movie you're talking about, and I can't think of it either.
True Grit.
True Grit, yeah. That's
Yeah.
it. Yep, that is a good one. I like that one. The Shootist.
The book was good, too.
Yeah. I haven't read that book, but I've seen both of those versions of the movie, and I like John Wayne's better, definitely. But yeah, he's got a shift ton of movies that he did.
Yep.
As far as, John Wayne as a person, his personal views and things, he caught some flack over like a Playboy interview that he did. I can't remember what it was, but then he got into that cancel culture where everybody was wanting to cancel the Duke and things that were named after him, take his name down and that kind of stuff. So, even the dead aren't immune to the cancel culture bullshit.
Amazing, isn't it?
It is. It's crazy. All right, last question, and this is a fun one. Do you believe in Sasquatch?
No.
You don't believe in Bigfoot? Don't believe that there's a Sasquatch or Bigfoot out there?
No. Maybe 25, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50, I might have, but with today's technology, I'm finding it hard to believe that, if there was a sighting today, that someone wouldn't have their cell phone camera with them to get some actual footage.
If you were invited to go on a Bigfoot hunt, would you go?
No.
If they had thermals, and not to kill him, just to prove that he was out there.
No, because I don't think he is.
Okay, very good. And what about?
I think the myth is fun.
It's
like the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
The myth is fun, but I don't. It's kind of like when I was a kid, I believed in Santa Claus, and then there came a point in time where I said, "Okay, there's no real that lives at the North Pole. There's Santa Claus, but just
no guy that's in a flying reindeer sleigh that delivers toys all over the world." Yeah.
To believe in them.
What about UFOs?
I'm not sure.
And when I say UFOs, I mean aliens.
I'm not sure. If
skeptical.
If there are, I find it hard to believe that humans on Earth are the only in this whole damn galaxy and universe. We're the only whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't discredit it. I don't go out. People are crazy.
Yeah. So I believe that there are other life forms out there other than on planet Earth, but I don't think anything has actually visited Earth. That's my thoughts on it.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to get that out of the way. So, David, this has been great, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on and talk with me and our listeners. You survived the new guy questions. Congratulations. You're now officially a lead head, a talking lead head.
I like that.
I'd like to send you a shirt if you wouldn't mind. So if I get your info when we get done, I'll make sure you get a talking lead shirt. And,
okay. Extra large.
Extra large. We'll make sure. And the website, the social medias, anything you got coming up, give it a plug.
Social media. And also check out I started a nonprofit, a grassroots conservative political organizing effort. It's called Rise Up Wisconsin. is the site, riseupwisconsin.com, and I'm organizing individuals at the grassroots level, conservatives, so we can influence Madison, that's the capital, and the legislature to enact legislation important to the grassroots and not just the special interests and the lobbyists. I don't believe the individual has a seat at the table, and so I'm trying to give them one with my influence.
Okay, and that's riseupwisconsin.com. You leadheads can go there. For our video viewers, I've got it up on the screen right now. And
donate. Need money. We need, these things are expensive.
This thing don't run on thanks, does it? We need money.
Gotta have money.
So you do some blogs and things on here?
Yeah. There's a blog. I'll do that. A newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter.
There you go.
Email. Just put your address in there, and you'll get my newsletters that come out periodically. And also, go to that Blue magazine. Like I said, just Blue magazine. If you put that in a search engine, it'll come up. I write 2 columns a month on emerging issues. Like I said,
That's it?
Mainly law enforcement. That's it.
Okay. So the thebluemagazine.com, leadheads. You can go there and columnist. I guess you'll be a columnist. Looky there.
Yep. Go under column. Click on that, and you'll see
FBI
twice
famous,
a month I submit.
but illegal and honest assessment. Very good. And you do that about once a week, you say?
Twice a month, so about every 2 weeks I submit a column.
Okay.
And one there, an honest assessment, and my thoughts on that Uvalde school shooting.
Oh my gosh, we could talk another hour on that.
Yeah.
I would love to get your thoughts
and
on that.
You know, when law enforcement is wrong, I just say they're wrong, messed up, whatever. You know, but when they're right, I'm the biggest supporter there is.
Well, I mean, again, you can't placate to incompetence. If something's not right, it's not right.
No, you lose credibility if you do.
Absolutely. And then Leadheads, make sure you go to his social media. It's Sheriff David Clarke on the Instagram. Is that on all the social medias?
All of at Sheriff Clarke, Clarke.
And you're
Parler, Telegram, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Fantastic. Now, what are your plans for the 4th of July? How are you going to go out and exercise your constitutional rights and freedoms of this birth of this nation?
With some rest and relaxation, going up to a northern Wisconsin, beautiful country up there, area called Door County.
Is that on the lake?
Property that some relatives of mine own, but we always get together on the 4th of July up there and get away, sit out on the water, and just enjoy life.
That sounds...
Get a little fireworks. Get some fireworks going up there. But just want to caution everybody: be careful around these fireworks.
Oh yeah.
Every 4th of July, you read these stories. Someone got their hand blown off. Somebody, lost an eye, and you got to handle those things like a firearm, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, I let other people do that. Let them.
Yeah, the professionals. Yeah, we just watch.
The pyrotechnics, I let them handle that, and I just I do my 12-ounce curls, and I'm good, baby.
There you go.
David, again, I really appreciate you being on. You're welcome back anytime. I would love to have you back on. I know the Leadheads are really going to enjoy this, and they're going to scream to have you back on. So hopefully we can, since you're not doing your own podcast now, maybe we can get you back periodically. That'd be great.
All right. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, Leadheads, that does it for another episode of the Talking Lead podcast. Make sure you go and support all those that make this show possible. Mission First Tactical, seal1.com. You can go to 1776 United, get our awesome T-shirts that I'm going to be sending David there. Factory 47 to get our AK Corner logoed items. I've got it up here somewhere. I think that's that tray right there. IWIUS, speaking of Uzis, they're a sponsor of the show. And Keltec. And make sure you use those discount codes to get your discounts when you go to those websites and do your shopping. And as always, Leadheads, keep your loved ones close
And keep your firearms closer. Stay locked and loaded.